You know that sinking feeling when you realize someone close to you isn't who you thought they were? For me, it started with a single email, a betrayal so cold, so calculated, it left me questioning everything. My name is Ellie Hartley, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm a photographer. Not the kind who snaps selfies for Instagram likes, but the kind who chases sunsets, captures fleeting moments, and tries to make art out of life's chaos. It's not glamorous work, but it's mine. I run a small gallery in Portland with my best friend, Maren Kale. We call it Heart and Kale, though some days it feels more like Heartache Central. Neither of us had much money when we opened. It was all scraped-together savings and late-night planning sessions over coffee gone cold. But we made it happen. The gallery became our dream, fragile but alive, like a seedling pushing through cracked concrete. And maybe that's why I trusted Draven Voss too easily. He came into our lives like sunlight after rain, promising growth where there'd only been struggle. Draven was everything I wasn't: confident, polished, magnetic. A curator with connections to galleries I could only dream of entering. When he first walked into the gallery, I thought he was just another potential client. But then he lingered, complimenting my work, asking questions about technique and inspiration. He treated me like an equal, something I wasn't used to hearing. Most people dismissed me as cute or quirky, as if those words canceled out serious talent. Draven didn't do that, at least not at first. "Ellie," he said one afternoon, leaning against the counter while I adjusted prints on the wall, "you have something special here. Your eye tells stories most photographers wouldn't dare touch." His voice carried this smooth authority, like every word was gospel. I wanted to believe him, not because I doubted myself exactly, but because believing him felt safe. Safe in a way I hadn't felt since starting this journey alone. Maren warned me once. She always did have sharper instincts than me. "He's charming," she said, flipping through invoices at the desk, "but charm can cut both ways, you know." I laughed it off, brushing her concern aside. Maren worried too much. That was her thing. Besides, Draven had already helped us land 2 big sales. How bad could he be? The truth hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my studio apartment, sipping stale coffee and scrolling through emails when I saw it, a subject line that froze my blood. "Congratulations, Draven Voss!" Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked. What I found inside shattered whatever trust one still clung to. Attached to the email was a photograph I recognized instantly. It was mine, a black and white shot of waves crashing against jagged rocks, taken during a storm last winter. I remembered standing ankle-deep in freezing water, shivering but determined, until I captured the perfect moment. That photo had never left my hard drive. Until now. My hands trembled as I scrolled down, reading congratulatory messages from judges praising Draven's vision and innovative perspective. Vision? Perspective? None of that belonged to him. It belonged to me, to hours spent editing, cropping, obsessing over light and shadow until the image felt right. And yet there it was, credited to someone else entirely. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun, and bile rose in my throat. Betrayal doesn't come neatly wrapped in logic or fairness. It slams into you raw and unrelenting. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, but the evidence stared back, undeniable. I called Maren immediately. Her voice answered on the second ring, cheerful and distracted. "Hey, Ellie, what's up?" "It's Draven," I blurted before she could finish. He stole one of my photos." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Maren exhaled sharply. "Are you sure?" "I'm looking at it right now," I said, my voice shaking. "It won a competition. Under his name." Another pause, longer this time. Then quieter. "Oh, Ellie." Her sympathy stung worse than the theft itself. I wanted anger, outrage, anything but pity. "What do I do?" I whispered, clutching the phone like it might anchor me to reality. We'll figure it out, Marin promised, her tone firm now. But don't confront him yet. Not until we know exactly what we're dealing with. She was right, of course. Rushing in blind wouldn't help anyone. Still, the weight of what had happened pressed down on me, relentless and suffocating. As I hung up, one thought looped endlessly in my mind. How could he? And beneath that, darker, sharper, how do I make him pay? The days that followed were a blur of anger and disbelief. I couldn't look at the photograph without feeling sick, like it had been tainted by Draven's lies. It wasn't just the theft, it was everything behind it. The late-night conversations where I'd confided in him about my doubts, my fears of never being good enough. He'd nodded sympathetically, offering advice that now felt like poison. "You're too modest, Ellie," he'd said once, his voice smooth as silk. "Artists like you deserve to be seen." Seen. What a cruel joke. I wanted to confront him, to march into his sleek office downtown and demand answers, but Marin stopped me. "Not yet," she warned, pacing the gallery floor while I sat slumped on a stool. "We need proof. Something undeniable." Proof. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and heavy. She was right, of course. Without evidence, I'd just look petty or jealous, another struggling artist lashing out at someone more successful. So instead of storming off to confront him, I started digging. Draven wasn't hard to track online. His polished persona practically screamed for attention. Instagram posts of gallery openings, LinkedIn updates boasting about new partnerships, even a blog post titled Navigating the Art World. Lessons from a curator. Reading it made my stomach churn. There he was posing as some kind of visionary, while my work, the work he'd stolen, was plastered across half the article. But social media wasn't enough. I needed something concrete, something no one could argue with. That's when I remembered the metadata. Every digital file carries a trail, invisible to most, but glaringly obvious to anyone who knows how to look. And I knew exactly how to look. That night, I stayed up until my eyes burned, combing through old files on my laptop. When I found the original photograph, I opened it in an editing program and pulled up the details. Sure enough, there it was. The timestamp, the camera settings, the location data, all pointing back to me. Then I cross-referenced it with screenshots of the competition announcement, which included a low-resolution version of the winning entry. Same image, same specs, different name attached. My hands trembled as I saved the files onto a USB drive. This was it, the smoking gun. But having proof wasn't enough. I needed leverage. A way to turn this betrayal into something bigger. Something that would hit Draven where it hurt most, his reputation. Marin arrived early the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a determined glint in her eye. "Anything?" she asked, handing me one of the cups. I held up the USB drive. "Everything." Her lips curved into a slow smile. "Good. Now we plan." For the first time since discovering Draven's deceit, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe not hope exactly, more like resolve. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let him get away with this. Not without a fight. Later that week, I ran into Draven at an art mixer hosted by a local gallery owner. He looked every bit the part of the rising star. Tailored suit, perfectly styled hair, an entourage of admirers trailing behind him. My pulse quickened as he spotted me across the room and excused himself from his group. "Ellie," he called, his tone warm and familiar, as if nothing had changed. "How are you?" I forced a smile, though it felt brittle on my face. "Busy," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You know how it is." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Tell me about it. Things have been eventful lately." His gaze lingered on mine, searching for something. Approval? Gratitude? I didn't give him either. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, letting curiosity color my tone. "Eventful? Like what?" "Oh, just the usual," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Awards, commissions, meetings with collectors. You'll get there someday, too. Keep working hard." His words dripped with condescension, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from snapping back. Instead, I nodded slowly, as if absorbing his wisdom. Thanks, Draven. I appreciate the encouragement. Something flashed in his eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or irritation, but it was gone before I could be sure. Any time, he said, clapping me lightly on the shoulder before turning to rejoin his admirers. As I watched him walk away, a cold clarity settled over me. This man saw me as insignificant, disposable. To him, I was nothing more than a stepping stone, someone whose talent could elevate his own status without consequence. But he underestimated me, and that mistake would cost him dearly. By the time I left the mixer, my mind was racing with possibilities. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start reaching out to other artists. If Draven thought he could exploit me, he'd soon learn he wasn't the only one with secrets worth exposing. But as I climbed into bed that night, exhaustion finally catching up to me, a nagging thought crept in. What if he finds out what I'm planning? What then? The next morning, I sat at my desk with the USB drive in front of me, staring at it like it might bite. The metadata was solid proof, but something gnawed at me, like there was more to uncover. I opened my laptop and began combing through every email thread I could find related to Draven. He wasn't careless enough to leave incriminating evidence lying around in plain sight, but people like him always underestimated how much they revealed between the lines. It started with a simple search, his name and the competition title. Nothing unusual popped up at first, just generic congratulatory messages from colleagues and clients. Then I found it, an email chain buried deep in my inbox, forwarded accidentally by one of the judges who'd mistakenly included me in the reply all. My stomach dropped as I read through the exchange. Draven, one judge wrote, "Your submission aligns perfectly with current trends in environmental storytelling. It's bold yet accessible, a guaranteed standout." Another chimed in, praising his visionary approach and thanking him for submitting such a timely piece. Timely? That photograph had been sitting untouched on my hard drive for months. Timely meant nothing. It was stolen, repackaged, and sold as innovation. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But worse than the theft itself was the casualness of it all. They weren't just applauding his work, they were celebrating the lie. I scrolled further, my hands trembling so badly I could barely click the mouse. There it was, the final nail in the coffin. An earlier message from Draven himself, sent weeks before the competition deadline. "Attached is my latest project," he'd written. "I believe it captures the raw emotion we discussed during our meeting last month." Attached to the email was a file labeled crashing_waves_final. Hey, my file, my waves, my raw emotion. For a moment, I couldn't move. The room seemed to shrink around me, walls closing in as nausea rolled through my gut. This wasn't just plagiarism. It was calculated manipulation. He'd planned this. Every compliment, every bit of advice, every late-night conversation about art and ambition. It had all been part of the setup. And I'd fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me, snapping me out of my haze. It was Marin. "You okay?" she asked when I answered, her voice tinged with concern. "No," I said flatly, my throat tight. "I'm not okay." "What happened?" I hesitated, then told her everything. The emails, the judge's comments, the realization that this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment betrayal, but a deliberate act designed to destroy me professionally while elevating him. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face, hot and bitter. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Marin spoke, her tone firm. "Ellie, listen to me. You can't let him win. Not like this." "How am I supposed to stop him?" I snapped, anger bubbling over. "He's got everyone eating out of the palm of his hand. Who's going to believe me over him?" "You don't need them to believe you right away," she countered. "You need to make sure they can't ignore the truth when it comes out. Trust me, you're smarter than him, smarter than all of them." Her words hit me like a slap. jolting me back to reality. She was right. Sitting here, feeling powerless, wasn't going to fix anything. If I wanted justice, I'd have to take control, not wait for someone else to hand it to me. That night, after hours spent poring over the emails and organizing my findings into a coherent timeline, I made a decision. Silence wouldn't protect me anymore. In fact, staying quiet would only give Draven more power. No, if I wanted to reclaim what was mine, I'd have to carve my own path and make absolutely certain Draven regretted crossing me. But as I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, exhaustion weighing heavily on my shoulders, another thought crept in. What if he sees this coming? What if he finds a way to twist it all back against me? The next few days blurred together in a haze of determination and sleepless nights. I couldn't afford to hesitate, not with so much at stake. Every hour spent unraveling Draven's web brought me closer to the reckoning he deserved. But it also made me painfully aware of how far ahead he'd been this whole time. He wasn't just stealing, he was playing a game, one where the rules bent to suit him and everyone else scrambled to keep up. I started by digging deeper into his digital footprint. If there was one thing I'd learned about people like Draven, it was that they always left traces, breadcrumbs of arrogance hidden beneath layers of charm. Using software I'd downloaded late one night, I accessed archived emails and draft folders linked to his accounts. It wasn't easy, and my heart pounded every time an alert flashed on the screen warning me about potential detection. But fear didn't stop me. Not anymore. What I found made my blood run cold. Dozens of messages exchanged between Draven and other artists, all laced with thinly veiled threats or promises of mutual benefit if they stayed quiet. One email stood out, a note he drafted but never sent, outlining exactly how he planned to discredit me if I ever questioned his integrity. "Ellie's insecure enough as it is," he wrote. "A few carefully placed doubts should be enough to neutralize any accusations." Neutralize, as if I were some kinds of threat to contain rather than a person whose trust he'd shattered. My hands clenched into fists as I stared at the words, each letter burning brighter than the last. This wasn't just theft, it was premeditated sabotage. And now, armed with proof, I knew I had to act fast. But I couldn't do it alone. Marin helped me reach out to other artists who'd crossed paths with Draven over the years. At first, they were hesitant, some too afraid of retaliation. Others convinced no one would believe them. But once I shared what I'd uncovered, their resistance crumbled. Together, we formed a coalition, pooling resources and testimonies to build an airtight case against him. Each story added another layer to the portrait of Draven Voss. Manipulative, entitled, dangerous. By the time we finished compiling everything, the evidence was overwhelming. With allies secured, I turned my attention to the next phase of the plan, setting a trap. Draven thrived on claiming credit for work that wasn't his, so I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. Using my photography skills, I created a series of new pieces inspired by the stolen photograph. Waves crashing against jagged rocks. Only this time, subtle details hinted at betrayal. A shadow shaped like a dagger slicing through water. Ripples distorted into fractured patterns. The images weren't obvious, but anyone looking closely would see the message woven into every frame. Once the works were ready, I leaked them online under an anonymous alias, tagging influential critics and collectors known for amplifying emerging talent. Within hours, the posts gained traction, sparking conversations across social media platforms. Draven wouldn't be able to resist inserting himself into the narrative. It was too perfect an opportunity for him to pass up. Sure enough, less than 24 hours later, he posted a smug update on Instagram showcasing one of the photographs as his own. Inspired by nature's chaos, he captioned it, tagging the same high-profile figures who'd praised his earlier win. The hypocrisy was almost laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Finally, I reached out to a journalist named Cora Lynn, whose exposés on art world scandals had earned her a reputation for unearthing the truth. I sent her an encrypted file containing everything: the metadata, the emails, the coalition's testimonies. Then I added a single line to the message. Draven Voss built his empire on lies. It's time the world saw the real artist behind his success. Cora responded within minutes, her tone sharp and intrigued. This could blow up, she warned. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? I hesitated before typing my reply. Was I ready? Probably not. But backing down wasn't an option anymore. I'm sure, I wrote. Just make sure he can't wriggle out of it. As I hit send, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since discovering Draven's betrayal, I felt like I was in control. The pieces were falling into place, each step bringing me closer to justice. But as I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, exhaustion creeping in, a nagging thought lingered. What happens when Draven realizes he's being played? What then? The night of the award ceremony arrived, and I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward for weeks. Across town, Draven was basking in the glow of yet another accolade, his name plastered across banners and screens as if he were some kinds of artistic prodigy. The irony made me sick. I refreshed my social media feeds one last time, watching the live updates trickle in. Guests posed for photos on red carpets, champagne flutes glinting under chandelier lights. Draven stood at the center of it all, smiling confidently for the cameras like a man who thought he was untouchable. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to focus. Tonight wasn't about fear, it was about justice. At precisely 8:15 p.m., just as the host began introducing Draven for his acceptance speech, I pressed send. Dozens of posts went live simultaneously, screenshots of emails, metadata timestamps, witness testimonies, all tagged with hashtags designed to trend instantly. I included direct mentions of every major industry figure, journalist, and critic I could think of, ensuring the information spread faster than anyone could suppress it. Within seconds, notifications flooded my screen. Retweets, shares, comments, all carrying the same message. Draven Voss is a fraud. Back at the venue, the first sign of trouble came when the massive screens flanking the stage flickered. For a brief moment, they displayed Draven's smug face mid-speech. But then the feed switched abruptly to something else entirely. Time-stamped images of my stolen photograph filled the screens, accompanied by side-by-side comparisons of his submission and my original file. Metadata scrolled below, undeniable proof that the work belonged to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People leaned forward in their seats, phones raised as they captured the chaos unfolding before them. On stage, Draven froze mid-sentence, his polished facade cracking like glass. His eyes darted toward the screens, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "What is this?" he stammered, gripping the podium tightly. "This has been tampered with." But the evidence kept coming. Clips of his incriminating emails played next, followed by video testimonials from other artists he'd wronged. Their voices echoed through the auditorium, raw and unfiltered, exposing the depth of his deceit. By the time Cora Lynn's article headline flashed across the screens, "Exposed, the man who stole art to build an empire," the room had erupted into murmurs of outrage. Draven's composure shattered completely. He tried to deny it, shouting over the growing din, but no one listened. Reporters swarmed the stage, shoving microphones in his face while demanding answers. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every panicked expression, every desperate attempt to deflect blame. For once, he couldn't charm his way out of trouble, I muttered aloud, watching the live stream from my couch. My heart raced, not with fear, but with satisfaction. Every lie he'd ever told, every person he'd manipulated, it was all unraveling right in front of him. As the crowd turned hostile, Draven bolted for the nearest exit. But he didn't get far. A wall of reporters blocked his path, shouting questions faster than he could respond. Cornered and exposed, he looked smaller somehow, less imposing without his tailored suit and practiced smile. And yet, even as I watched him crumble, a strange sense of detachment washed over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore, at least not entirely. It was about reclaiming what he'd tried to take away: my voice, my art, my truth. But as the live stream cut to black and silence settled around me, a new question surfaced in my mind. What happens now? The days following the exposé felt surreal, like stepping out of a storm into sunlight I hadn't realized I'd been craving. News outlets couldn't get enough of Draven's downfall. His name became synonymous with fraud, his reputation shredded beyond repair. Within 48 hours, he was stripped of every accolade he'd stolen, including the prestigious award that had sparked this entire nightmare. Galleries canceled exhibitions bearing his name. Collectors demanded refunds, and whispers of lawsuits swirled through the art world like wildfire. By the end of the week, he'd vanished from public view entirely, retreating into obscurity as quickly as he'd risen to fame. Meanwhile, my life transformed in ways I never expected. Journalists reached out for interviews, eager to hear the story behind the scandal. Critics praised my work, not just the photograph at the center of the controversy, but everything else I'd poured my soul into over the years. Suddenly, people weren't dismissing me as cute or quirky anymore. They were calling me visionary, courageous, groundbreaking. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and humbling all at once. But what mattered most wasn't the recognition. It was the opportunities it brought. Lucrative contracts rolled in, partnerships formed with galleries I'd only dreamed of working with. Marin and I expanded Heart and Kale, transforming it into a thriving hub for emerging artists seeking ethical representation. We created mentorship programs, workshops, and even a scholarship fund for young creatives determined to make their mark without compromising their integrity. Every time I saw a new artist walk through our doors, hope shining in their eyes, I felt a sense of purpose deeper than anything I'd ever known. Still, not everything about the aftermath was easy. Some nights, I'd lie awake replaying the betrayal, the way Draven's charm had lulled me into trusting him, the way his lies had nearly destroyed me. Those memories didn't fade overnight, but they no longer controlled me either. Instead, they fueled something bigger, a determination to ensure no one else would suffer the same fate. One evening, weeks after the dust had settled, Marin joined me on the gallery's rooftop patio. The city lights stretched endlessly before us, a glittering reminder of how far we'd come. She handed me a glass of wine and raised hers in a toast. "To justice," she said simply. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling despite the weight still lingering in my chest. "And to resilience." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat down to write a message, a final reflection on everything that had happened. Words flowed easily now, unburdened by anger or doubt. They say revenge isn't sweet, but standing up for yourself? That's sweeter than anything. There's power in speaking your truth, even when it feels impossible. And there's freedom in knowing you won't let anyone take what's yours without a fight. I paused, staring at the screen as emotions surged within me. Pride, relief, gratitude. But beneath it all lingered a question, one I hoped would resonate with anyone who heard my story. So, tell me, what would you do if someone tried to steal your dreams? As I hit publish and leaned back in my chair, a quiet certainty settled over me. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning. For me, for the gallery, for every artist brave enough to stand up and demand better. And yet, as I turned off the light and climbed into bed, a thought lingered, soft but persistent. What happens when the next storm comes? Will I be ready?